Fair warning, this is probably going to be a fairly short video. I mean, it was a fairly short stream. It only took us about 7 hours in order to smash through the game. 100%ing, obviously, because duh, why wouldn't you want to? Although, you don't have to, which is a nice little touch. You can basically just say, yeah, I'm good if you ever run into a wall, or stop having fun, or otherwise have issues with it. I will also say that, just as a bit of a personal perspective on things, I tried all the visual filters throughout the course of the game, all the different color filters. The sepia one was the one that was the easiest on my eyes, and most of my viewers as well. So as a consequence, I'm just giving you that piece of advice if that's something that's a barrier for you. Because Lord knows the mono 1-bit thing, well, it's not easy on the eyes, is it? Any of us who used to play the old Apple IIe's knows what the green filter will do to you after a while, and the blue one can go right to hell. But anyways, it's more or less impossible to talk about this game gameplay or story-wise without spoiling the hell out of everything. So this is your spoiler warning. Spoilers, spoilers, spoilers! There's a Kraken! What? Okay, real talk. Most of you probably know the basic precept of the game, but on the off chance you don't, you're given a little device. It allows you to do several things. This is very, very rules magic, as I've talked about many times. So you see a corpse, you can interact with it, and that allows you to see a few seconds up to the moment of their death, and then you get to walk around in a range around their corpse, at the exact moment of said death. You're an insurance adjuster. I love the mundanity of that, by the way. And your whole goal is to try and figure out who is whom, and who died to what. Figure out the fate of the Obra Dinn. Okay, this is a deduction game, but put more bluntly, this is a puzzle game. This might actually be the third best puzzle game I have played ever in my entire life. And the only reason it is surpassed by anything is because the Portal games exist. This is astonishingly well designed. I want you to run through me with this for just a second here, okay? For those of you who have played this game, think about any time at which you were able to really deduce something. I don't mean like early on where they tend to give you anchor points, as a good puzzle should. You know, it gives you something to logic off of or to figure out from. Not talking about that. I'm talking about when you get to the point where it's like, okay, well, this person handed this to this person and came out of here. And in a previous scene, I heard them talk about this person as if they were their boss. So that means this person was coming over here. And therefore, because they were up here at this point in time, they couldn't have been this person. So this person has to be this person. Lock it in. Okay? Think about that. That's the gameplay right there. You know, trying to deduce your way through it. Now think about all the pieces that led you to that deduction. There may or may not be many, because what this game does is it actually shotguns clues at you. But the way it does this, it does it in the level design. The actual nature of the Obra Dinn, its layout, the map, who stays where, who interacts with what. That's one of the clues. One of the other clues is obviously the way that they look. Their appearance doesn't really change that much throughout the course of the voyage. Another clue is their voice. The voice acting was designed to not only use proper terminology, which is part of the writing, but also proper, linguistics. Accents is a big thing. Identifying someone's voice to be able to say, that's this person in this scene is a very important key distinguishment. I mentioned the uniforms, but also as a related thing to the uniforms, who they tend to hang out with. Most of the seamen tend to hang out with other seamen, unless they're hanging out with someone of the same nationality. Most of the people from India tend to hang out with most of the people from India. Most of the people from Russia tend to hang out with most of the people from Russia. So even though most of the seamen hang out and most of the topmen hang out, there's one topman Russian who hangs out with the seaman Russian, and so forth and so on. You can figure out, okay, well, that's obviously a steward because they're wearing a steward's uniform. Well, who are they? Well, they happen to be interacting with, or actually even just near this particular person. And I already figured out who that person is in a previous thing. So they're that person's steward. You get the idea. So I just listed like 5 things. Sorry for going through this a little bit quickly. We've got the layout of the ship, everyone's appearances, who they happen to be interacting with, the pictures. Those pictures are surprisingly important puzzle-solving tools for figuring out what's going on and where. You know, the little portraits that they have, which you use to zoom in and figure out what their faces are. We've got the specific events, the voice acting, the nationalities, the accents, There's also the nature of the sequence of events, the internal continuity. You can tell that because this happened here and this happened here, in this point, it can't be this person, but it can be this person. So we've got continuity as an actual deduction tool. Do you get my overall point? Normally, and true in this case, the format still holds. I like to distinguish things on two overall axes, the story axis and the gameplay axis. Context and mechanic. But the thing is, in this game, the two are one and the same in many cases. The voice acting helps the gameplay because it helps you deduce things. The visual continuity helps the gameplay because you can tell what's going on where. The internal continuity helps the gameplay because you can figure out where the timeline is, and so forth and so on. All of the excellent examples of things that are usually mostly just pushing the story axis similarly are used to figure out what's going on. The deduction. I know I've just spent like 8 minutes saying this is a really good puzzle game, but I wanted to go into a little bit more detail on exactly why I feel that is. This is brilliantly designed. Nobody who ever actually worked on this game will ever listen to this, but if they happen to, I just want to heap praise upon them, because I can actually picture the nightmare that it would be to map this whole game out, because they would have had to sit down and think, okay, so, and it basically takes snapshots, literally, possibly, like actually literally sketching it out on paper, and say, okay, this, and I've done something like this to a much, much lesser scale, not with, 60 people before, and what I did was I actually had figurines on a frickin' map. It's like, okay, this person's here, here, and here, here, and here, and this is the starting position. Actually, I started at the end, so here's the ending position. I took a picture of it. So I got the picture now. It's like, okay, well, this person moves here, and this person moves here, and this person came to here. But hang on, if they do this, that means this person do here. And just mapping out all of this. This is a function of directing, specifically. This is storyboarding, and this is blocking, and trying to figure out who would do what, when. It had to have been such a nightmare to put together, and it is so well done and so well thought out because, and this is going back to the shotgunning clues thing I mentioned earlier, some people might say this game is a little bit too easy to deduce because there are multiple clues to multiple people's identity. However, I think that's actually an aspect of good game design because the intent here is obviously here's 5 clues to figure out who this person is. Which one do you encounter? Everyone thinks differently, right? Everyone processes differently. Everyone notices everything differently. It's going to be a different experience. I happen to notice this one, but maybe you notice this one and your friend noticed this one. All 3 of these clues lead us to the same target. We all look at that and like, aha! And there's always a sense of pride and accomplishment with regards to actually having figured it out. And this all is wrapped up into a beautiful bow by the best mechanic of the game. It was so good I gave it 2 positives by itself. I wanted to give it 3. I couldn't justify that. But this game has so many different mechanics that all work in conjunction with each other. Right? Each gear is doing its own piece. But this game would be so much worse without one mechanic, and it's the rule of 3. So I'm going to describe this on the off chance you don't know about it. And if you do know about it, you can jump into the comments and tell me how stupid I am. It's a deduction game. You have to identify identity and what killed them. Okay? That's our goal. That's the task. Now, rushing through and getting through all this, let's assume for a moment that the rule of 3 mechanic didn't exist at all. I'm sorry. Let me explain what the rule of 3 mechanic is. Every time you have 3 correct identities and causes of death, so 3 correct guesses, the game pauses immediately and says, good job. You figured 3 out. Here you go. And it gives you a marker to indicate that progress. Later on, pretty much at the very end of the game, it actually does that every 2 you get when there's actually only 4 left. So that's really well done. But hang on. Now let's talk about why this is such a good idea. Let's assume that mechanic didn't exist. So you're just putting it together with no indication of if you've gotten anything right or wrong, which itself actually removes some of your deductive tools. Because in some cases, you, especially for some of the seamen who just kind of died during the Kraken attack, for example, you're left with not much to really go on, other than the fact that they were here, and then they weren't here. So, And so in some cases, it's like, well, there's 3 seamen that all fall under the same category. They all do the same thing. This is one of the problems with real-life medical diagnoses. I'm not trying to be political. I'm just saying that in real life, most medical diagnoses boil down to, well, it's not this, 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 or this, so it's one of these 4 things. This game gives you a, don't worry, you got it right indicator. But if it wasn't there at all, well, that would be awful. More to the point, that would be irritating. Now, hang on. Because this goes the other direction, too. Let's assume that it gave you the you got it correct thing the moment you picked up anything correct, the moment you get one person right. The problem is this could be irritating, but would be worse in the opposite direction. Because at that point, you don't have to deduce anything. You could just sit down and say, okay, well, I'm pretty sure this is this person. I'm pretty sure this person died to X because I can see them being shot. So let's just go down the list. It was that person. Da-da-da-da. It would be too irritating or it would be too boring. So we need some kind of in-between measure, something to indicate we have gotten stuff right, something to anchor our other guesses on. One of the things I started doing, especially towards the very end, was I would narrow down, okay, I'm very certain about these two. And then I would deliberately go and try to say, okay, well, this third person is one of these three people. Is it this one? Is it this one? It was this one. And therefore, it becomes part of the deductive tool. It becomes part of the process of elimination that you're using in order to figure out who's going on, where, what, and why. And because you have that 3, you have an anchor you can move on. 2 later on, like I said, but you have an anchor that you can deduce that. This is a brilliant feature because it's not too easy. It's not too boring. It's not too irritating. It becomes part of the deductive process, but hang on, it does something else very important as well. It gives you a sense of progression. Let me ask you something. Let's say you're playing a video game. Doesn't really matter what kind. And let's say you have no idea where the end of the current stage or boss or fight or puzzle is. Now, some people are okay with that, and that's fine. I have known quite a few people, including myself, and I'm going to leave this question open, who are very not okay with that. The total lack of progression indicator. No health bar on the boss. No idea if you've gotten any part of the puzzle correct. No idea how long the mission's going to be, etc., etc. Now, whether this works or not depends on the specific game, obviously, but some kind of indicator of some kind of progress, if nothing else, just a little mid-mission checkpoint save happening up, hey, you just got a checkpoint, so you know you're making some progress kind of a thing, is helpful. It helps you to have a tangible feedback on saying you're doing okay, you're on the right track, keep going. And so it kind of gives you that little push to keep going because, I just got another 3 down. Now I can start working on what happened during the troubles of the soldiers of the night, and so forth and so on. There is one way this could be made better. And you already know what I'm going to say if you know me at all. Options. Make it so that there's an option to either disable it entirely. So, you have to go through without any kind of hints on it whatsoever, a hard mode, if you will. Or you can have it be every 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, or let's say up to 10 would probably be a good number there. What this does is this effectively becomes a difficulty option, a nice granular difficulty option that allows you to decide exactly how much you want this mechanic to be a part of your gameplay experience. That's the only... It's not even really a complaint. It's more like a, it could be better in this manner kind of a thing I could mention about that. And it is brilliant. But I should mention a couple other things before I wrap this up. So I haven't talked about the narrative because why would I? It's a ship that was damned from the beginning. But I do want to mention 3 specific things, excuse me. Let's talk about the intro first. Right at the beginning of the game, it's like, okay, you're here. Here's the watch. There's a dead person right there. Okay, click. And you see his death. And, there's the one who killed him. So it's okay, so we walk over and we go through the thing. We walk in. We get irritated by a mechanic. I suppose I should mention, one of my biggest gameplay negatives and the biggest thing I hate about this game, let me walk you through this because it's weird there's a padding aspect of this game which does not have to be there. So every time you go to a new corpse, what happens is about a 20-second musical sting plays where you can't really do anything but sit there and look around. And then slowly it all fades away. Then the book opens up, fills out, and then you're actually jumped back into the scene. This is irritating as hell. If the game was longer, this probably would have been more negatives. There's so many ways to fix this, too. First of all, the slow fade out doesn't need to be so slow. Second of all, just make it like a quick snapshot. A literal just, boom, book fills out, go right into it. Just boom, done. This is pretty much the seconds and minutes problems I talk about a great deal when it comes to game design. It just stretches it out unnecessarily. Irritation aside, moving on. So see the first person. You see the captain shot. I'm pretty sure it's the captain because they just mentioned that. Okay, so we can identify that's the captain. Okay. We go in, we see that Beanie Boy, best character in the game, by the way. Beanie Boy has been sliced to death by the captain. And he's talking about where are they? They're under the sea. Okay. And then there's another person killed. Then we see Abigail, who is killed in some kind of thing. And oh my God, is that a kraken? And then the captain killed themselves. This is the intro. I talk a lot about intros and outros when it comes to game design on both the story and the gameplay axis. This is a very good intro on both axes. On the story perspective, this is a classic cold open. As I've talked about many times when it comes to television design, the cold open is designed to grab your attention and hold it. It's at its best when it tends to prompt questions. Why exactly were the people attacking the captain? Was this a straight-up mutiny? Had the captain done something wrong? Why was there a giant squid octopus thing attacking this place? Why was the captain committing suicide at the end of this? Questions. You're hooked. You want to know more. But gameplay-wise, it does everything it needs to as well, because it introduced every mechanic of the game very quickly and in a very well-tutorialized fashion. How we interact with the corpse, how we identify people, looking at the pictures, being able to use the pictures, and, so I can hold tab, get picture, okay, it's that person, click that, navigating the book, because there's admittedly some interface irritations, very mild stuff, but it was kind of irritating navigating the book around. But point is, you figure out how to navigate the book, how to see that, how to select this, how to see the transcript. We can see the location it is on the ship. We can use that to deduce things. Like how do we know it's the captain? Well, they say it's him. He's got the tricorn hat. In the picture, he looks like he's the person giving the commands. And I guess that's... and he's actually in the captain's cabin. So there you go. There's those multiple point clues I mentioned earlier. It's also pretty obvious what's going on for most of the people here. You notice we don't identify all the people in this last scene, do we? But we get anchors, like I was talking about earlier. We get those early easy clues to give us something to deduce off of. And we also get jumping off points. Abigail is the biggest one here. We see Abigail die to the Kraken attack, and it's like, well, now we see all kinds of other people going through all kinds of other stuff, and now we've got hints. I actually went way through the game, it was almost towards the end of the game, when I suddenly had a thought, because I was trying to identify the fates of 3 people who abandoned ship right before the Kraken, literally right before, as the Kraken was rising up from the sea. And I was like, hang on. I've seen a scene on the deck during the Kraken attack. It was one of the first scenes I saw, all the way back with Abigail's fate. And sure enough, we were able to see the rowboat with the 3 corpses being flung to safely live in Africa, of course. It is a wonderfully designed intro that really gets you going very quickly. And it's also, it has its wonderful little moments. I mentioned the Kraken moment. Another good one is the fact that there's the glittering. Even though everything's frozen, there's this one thing that's kind of glittering, despite the fact that it probably shouldn't be, because you're going through a frozen memory of time, so that's kind of terrifying in its own right. But hang on, it gets worse. The best scene in the whole game, in my opinion, was we've gone through all this stuff, and we did that, and we go down into the deck. We've already seen a bunch of the Kraken attack. We see the person ripped apart, and there's kind of this natural flow to events as you kind of move your way through the ship. But then we got down, and we see this blood spurt pile, and I start following the blood pile around. This is so brilliant the way this is designed. Because on the outside of the ship, I don't remember the name, please forgive me, but there's a space in between the quarters and the ship and all that, and the actual hull. There's a space there, right? And we're navigating this space and following this blood trail until we find a corpse just sitting there. We use the watch on it. We hear some weird noises. We have no idea. And then we hear a gunshot, and then it cuts off. The game always bothers to use some kind of audio design to help inform the specific cause of death, because in multiple cases they're being killed by like 3 or 4 things at once. You have to kind of deduce which it is. I only had issues with one of those in the entire game, and it's the only time I had to look anything up. I just asked chat. What was I going? What is this? But anyway, so we hear a gunshot. Okay. We look around, and there's tiny little peek holes. So here's the outer hull. Here's the inner hull. And there's the peek holes you can see through. And we look through, and we see this giant spider crab death thing right there. And that's the best moment of the game. Because that's the exact moment you're just like, whoa! It's the escalation point. The typical Telltale Act 3, if you will. And it's brilliantly handled and leads to you kind of deducing what happened next and seeing a whole lot of people die to a whole lot of nonsense. And it is appropriately horrifying as you piece together what happened. This is a good game. I hope you've enjoyed my thoughts thereupon. I look forward to your comments. I'll see you next time.